Hey, what's up guys, another video here. So today I want to go over an important topic, investing for young men. And I do want to state a disclaimer, this is not financial advice. This is simply my financial opinion, my personal opinion. And if you are trying to seek professional financial advice, please seek a certified professional. So this is just my opinion and here we go. So the first is you need to define when you want to retire. Is it sooner or is it later? This will determine if you will heavily use tax advantage accounts such as 401ks and IRAs and the respective Roth options. If you can utilize these options and let them grow while building a non-tax advantage account, by all means do so. So I'm talking in reference to someone in the United States, but your country may have the respective tax advantage options, but basically in the United States we have the 401ks and the IRAs, and they also have a Roth option where money is put on an after-tax basis and it grows on a tax deferred basis. So what this means is for the regular 401k and IRA, you're not taxed on the money that you contribute to the plan, but when you do pull the money when it is time, so normally it's age 59 and a half, then you will be taxed on that amount. However, for a Roth option, what's going to happen is you place money into the account so you can't take advantage of lowering your taxable income on your tax return, but you will be able to grow that money on a tax deferred basis. So when you do pull the money out, it is not taxed. So some people like the Roth option, some people like the pre-tax option, so it's really up to you. However, I don't really recommend this if you are considering retiring decades before that, because if you do pull the money out prematurely, then you'll be taxed accordingly with penalties and the normal tax rate. So really depends, but the point I'm trying to make across here is the fact that if you do choose to retire at that age, it's fine. But if you choose to retire considerably earlier, you may not want to place too much money in these tax deferred accounts. So that is just my opinion. But again, if you are retiring considerably sooner, decades sooner than 65, then it's advisable that you don't put too much money in. But if you are able to have an income where it can accommodate both the pre-tax, the tax advantage accounts, and the after-tax accounts, then please by all means do so. But again, that's only in the case where you make a lot of income. So again, you just have to determine from this point, are you going to retire way later? Do you enjoy your career that greatly, or are you able to sustain your career until old age and you're satisfied with what you do for work? Or do you dislike your work and do you want to retire as soon as possible? So you have to make this determination when you start working, if you decide to start working for a long time, or if you want to work X number of years and then retire considerably sooner. So just please make that consideration. So second is you can have a safe, predictable growth with diversified ETFs such as VTI, VOO, and VGT. However, if you want more aggressive ETFs, you can do leveraged ETFs such as TQQQ offered by ProShares, but the swings on leveraged ETFs are extreme. So for any beginning investor, you should probably first put your toes into ETFs because they are widely diversified, meaning if one company goes bad, goes bankrupt, gets delisted, things like that, then you'll be protected somewhat from that loss. So the general rule of thumb is when you do invest into ETF, do something where it reflects an index such as the US total stock market index, things like that. The ETFs that I did recommend, VTI, VOO, and VGT, they are all under Vanguard. They do have a low expense ratio, so that's why they're quite popular. And the second thing I mentioned was the leverage ETF. So basically leverage uses debt to amplify the returns, but again, when the fund goes through a downturn, it's amplified as well. So you have huge swings in the performance of the leverage ETF, so just keep that in mind. But if you do want to have more reward and risk, then you may want to do a leverage ETF. Again, I am not recommending it for a beginning investor, but it is a possibility. But if you want to place your money in a somewhat predictable way where it can grow throughout the decades, then definitely do ETFs. And again, you can do specialty ETFs or you can do general market ETFs as I noted. So again, a perfectly safe way to invest your money, but the most important thing is to look at how diversified the fund is, what kind of sector it's in, and finally the expense ratio. So in general, Vanguard has the lowest expense ratio, so you may want to look into that. Other actively managed funds may have a higher expense ratio where they'll take more of your money as time passes. So just keep that in mind. Again, ETFs are a great way to automatically diversify your portfolio if you are choosing to invest in them. So third is you can have very explosive growth with individual tech stocks. A way to diversify this risk is to invest in in legacy tech companies to invest in a variety of them or do a combination thereof. So you can have a base of FANG stocks, which is Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, then allocate funds to promising small tech companies. So naturally, this is more risky than placing funds into a general ETF, but there is a possibility to have explosive growth in these tech companies. So you can have legacy companies like the ones I mentioned. They may or may not have dividends and the stock may split. So the market cap will increase over time, but you can have a base of those stocks. So you can look at other promising small tech stocks, which can include Slack, Square, Palantir, Snowflake, and any other type of data analytics company that has a potential for a very high return. I think data will be a big sector coming up, so data analytics and data software. So you can look into that. Again, that is not financial advice, simply my financial opinion, and you can look into those. But if you have a base of the big tech companies that are already established and you have also exposure to these smaller tech companies that are just starting out or maybe they recently had their IPO, then you can look into those as well. And just remember, the risk is much greater, but your reward, your potential reward is much greater. So keep that in mind. So you can have a base of these FANG stocks and you can have another allocation toward these smaller plays that have the potential for exponential growth. So the third option is to have a combination of all of the above. However, if you plan on retiring very early like myself, you need to have an aggressive approach to investing. This will entail much more risk, so I do not suggest it, but realize risk needs to be taken in order to achieve extreme results. So just a recap of those points 2 and 3, you need to expose yourself to considerable risk if you want to retire decades early. So keep in mind, if you do have a general stock market index fund, then again, the growth is going to be much slower than something that is exposed to a very small sector or perhaps a single company. So just keep that in mind. And if you don't want to expose yourself to that amount of risk and you plan to work for decades, perhaps until 60, 65, it's perfectly fine to continually invest in index funds where you have the risk exposure flattened. But again, if you do plan to retire much earlier, then you need to expose yourself to considerable risk, I would say. So you have exposure to a small set of funds that have the potential for exponential growth. So it really depends on you. But again, in my case, I did invest in many small tech companies, and again, it fortunately did well, and I became a multimillionaire at age 35. But again, if you don't want to expose yourself to risk, or if you don't have that much income to invest, then it really depends on your situation. But just remember, if you want to have these explosive growth rates, then you have to expose yourself to considerable risk. So just keep that in mind. It may work out for you, it may not work out for you, but that's why I keep saying this is not financial advice. But again, that's the general rule of thumb. More risk, more reward. But more risk comes with potential increased downside. So just keep that in mind. So the fifth point, which I believe is very important as well, do not get divorced. And if you do get married, have a prenup and postnup to minimize the financial fallout. You do not want a gray divorce without said protections, as you will be devastated financially and won't be able to recover. So this is the last point, which isn't really related to investing, but this is more to protect your investments and your gains. So if you do decide to get married, do not have a prenup right before the wedding, maybe 6 months to a year before the wedding, and have a postnup where it reinforces those prenuptial agreements. So this is very important. And let's say you get married very young and you get divorced in your 50s or 60s, then you will be financially devastated because you won't have the protections, and the wife may get alimony, child support, and of course the asset split. So it really depends on your location, and it depends what locality you are in the United States, if you are in the United States. But please be very careful, and if you are someone of considerable wealth or you plan to have considerable wealth in the future, then please get a prenup and postnup to fortify your assets if you do decide to get married. Again, it's not the most ideal situation, but you want to protect yourself to the extent where you don't have devastating losses when it comes to divorce. But if you can avoid divorce, great. If you do get married, please protect yourself. So hopefully, guys, this was a little helpful. Please go over the 4 points again and make sure that you follow them and consider yourself for risk and growth if you do decide to go this route. And please like and subscribe to the video if you found this helpful. If you are interested in my book, please see the link down below. It describes how I became a multimillionaire at age 35 by only having a salary income of 40K to 81.5K from the ages of 22 to 35. It goes over income, expenses, and more importantly, investing. So that's it, guys, and stay tuned for the next video.